The coffee that changed fate. The coffee hit her before the insult did. It splashed across her collarbone and down the thin fabric of her waitress uniform, soaking into the cotton like boiling rain. The heat burned instantly, sharp, merciless, unforgiving. For a split second the entire cafe froze in that strange silence that only happens when something cruel occurs in public and no one wants to be the first to react. Then the laughter came. Low at first, then louder. "Maybe next time watch where you're going," the young man sneered. His name was Adrian Hargrove, son of a real estate billionaire, heir to a fortune so large it had never taught him the value of a single human being. Lena Carter didn't scream immediately. The pain took half a second to reach her brain. When it did, the sound that left her throat wasn't loud, it was small. A broken, frightened sound she tried to swallow because waitresses in expensive cafes learned quickly that customers didn't like noise. Her hands trembled as she clutched the soaked fabric over her chest. The heat stung deep and tears blurred the marble floor beneath her. I'm sorry," she whispered automatically. She wasn't even sure what she was apologizing for. Adrian leaned back in his chair, amused. His expensive watch flashed under the cafe lights as he lifted his phone. "Oh, this is perfect," he laughed. "My followers are going to love this." He started recording. "Look at this," he narrated loudly. "Clumsy waitress ruins my morning. Maybe they should hire people with brains instead of charity cases." Around them, the cafe filled with silent witnesses pretending to check emails, scroll social media, or study menus they had already memorized. No one moved. No one spoke. Because everyone knew the Hargrove name. And nobody challenged the powerful. But someone was watching. In the quiet corner booth near the window, a man in a charcoal suit slowly placed his porcelain teacup onto its saucer. The gentle clink cut through the noise like a blade. He had been still for the last 20 minutes. So still he almost seemed part of the furniture. But now his gaze lifted, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop. Steel blue eyes locked onto the scene. Ancient eyes. Dangerous eyes. Eyes that had witnessed centuries of cruelty and had stopped being surprised by it long ago. The man stood. The movement was slow, unhurried, controlled. Like time itself obeyed him. No one noticed him at first, until he started walking toward Adrian. Each step echoed softly across polished marble. Conversations faded. The air tightened with something invisible and heavy. Predatory. Lena didn't see him yet. She was still staring at the floor, trying not to cry. Adrian did. And something deep inside him, something primal and instinctive, felt fear. But arrogance crushed it quickly. "Hey, old man," Adrian scoffed. "Mind your business." The stranger stopped 3 steps away. For a moment he said nothing. He simply looked at Adrian the way a storm looks at a city before deciding whether to destroy it. "You should apologize," the man said quietly. The voice was calm, full, gentle, and somehow more terrifying than a shout. Adrian laughed louder. "Or what?" The man tilted his head slightly, studying him like an insect pinned beneath glass. "Adrian Hargrove," he said softly. 26 years old. Expelled from Cambridge after your father paid to bury a harassment scandal. 3 reckless driving charges erased by donations. And a trust fund you cannot access without your father's signature. The smile vanished from Adrian's face. "How do you?" "You own nothing," the man continued, voice smooth as winter ice. "Not your apartment. Not your car. Not your reputation. Only your surname." Silence swallowed the cafe. Adrian's cheeks flushed crimson. No one had ever spoken to him like this. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. The man didn't answer. Instead he turned to Lena. And something changed. The coldness in his eyes softened. Not completely, but enough to reveal something human beneath centuries of distance. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. Lena blinked up at him through tears. For the first time since the accident, someone sounded like they cared. I can't go to the hospital," she whispered. "I can't afford to miss work." The man studied her burned skin and trembling hands. His jaw tightened slightly. He removed his coat and placed it around her shoulders. The fabric was warm, expensive, heavy, protective. Then he slipped an envelope into her hand. "For medical care," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "I can't take this." "This is not charity," he interrupted softly. "This is balance." He turned and walked toward the exit. But as he passed Adrian, he paused for 1 second. Just one. "You should learn," he murmured, "that cruelty has consequences." Then he left. The cafe exhaled as if it had been holding its breath the entire time. And Adrian Hargrove felt something new for the first time in his privileged life. Humiliation. He clenched his fists. Rage burned hotter than the coffee that had burned Lena. "This isn't over," he muttered. It wasn't. Because the man who had just walked out of the cafe was not merely a stranger. He was Lucien Voss, head of the most powerful underground syndicate in Europe, feared by governments, respected by kings, and whispered about in the supernatural world as something far older than human. A vampire king living among mortals. And Adrian Hargrove had just made the worst mistake of his life. Lena took the bus home that night, clutching the envelope in her pocket like it might disappear if she let go. Her apartment sat above a failing laundromat in the poorest district of the city. Paint peeled from the walls. Pipes groaned in the night. But the space was clean, because dignity was the one luxury Lena refused to lose. Her younger brother, Noah, looked up from his textbooks when she entered. "You're late," he said, then froze. "Lena, what happened?" "Nothing," she lied instantly. But the burn on her skin betrayed the truth. Within minutes she found herself sitting at the tiny kitchen table while Noah gently applied ointment with shaking hands. "We can't keep doing this," he whispered. "You're working yourself to death." She forced a smile. "You just focus on medical school." 5 years ago, a car accident had taken their parents. Since then, Lena had been mother, sister, provider, protector. And tonight she had almost broken. After Noah fell asleep, she opened the envelope. Inside was more money than she had seen in her life. And a simple black card with a phone number. No name. No title. Just numbers. Her fingers trembled. Who was that man? Why had he helped her? And why did she feel like her life had just quietly stepped onto a path she couldn't see the end of? Across the city, Lucien Voss stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking glittering skyscrapers. His advisor spoke carefully behind him. "You've been watching the girl." Lucien's reflection stared back from the glass. "She reminds me," he said quietly, "of someone I used to be." The advisor frowned. Vampires didn't talk like that. They didn't feel like that. Lucien turned toward the city lights, eyes glowing faintly gold in the darkness. "Prepare the investigation," he said. "I want everything on the Hargrove family." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They just declared war." The trap with a pretty paycheck. By the time Lena realized the world had shifted, it was already too late to step back. 3 days after the cafe incident, the burn on her chest had started to blister less, but the humiliation still felt fresh, like it lived inside her ribs. She returned to work anyway because survival didn't pause for pain. But the cafe manager didn't even let her reach the counter. He stood near the staff door with his hands clasped like he was praying she wouldn't explode. "Lena," he said quietly, eyes darting away. "Come to my office." The hallway to his office felt longer than usual. The walls, lined with polished art prints, suddenly looked like expensive jokes hanging over people who didn't belong. Inside he shut the door and exhaled. "I'm so sorry," he said. Her stomach dropped. "No," Lena whispered. "Please don't. I have to let you go." The words landed like a second burn. Lena just stared at him, waiting for the explanation that would make it not real. "Because of the incident?" she finally asked, voice cracking. He nodded once, ashamed. "A complaint came from a VIP guest. We were warned. If I don't terminate you, the cafe loses our lease." "But I was the victim," Lena said, heat rising behind her eyes. "He poured coffee on me. He recorded me." "I know," the manager said quickly. "I saw the video. I know you did nothing wrong." His voice softened. "But the Hargroves own half this block. They don't lose, Lena. They don't even argue. They just erase people." Erase. That word hit her harder than fired. Lena's fingers curled into fists. "I have a brother in medical school," she whispered, as if saying it out loud would make the universe remember she was human. "My rent is late. My family needs me. Please. I'll work double shifts. I'll take the worst hours." The manager slid an envelope across the desk. "Your last pay. And a small severance." His eyes glistened. "That's all I can do." Lena stared at the envelope like it was an apology shaped into paper. Then she nodded because pride didn't pay rent either. She walked out without crying, only because she couldn't afford to cry in front of people who might enjoy it. But when she reached the alley behind the cafe, she sank onto the cold concrete steps and let the tears spill out fast and ugly, like her body had been holding them hostage. She cried for the burn. She cried for the laughter. She cried because not a single person had defended her except a stranger with steel blue eyes. And she cried because deep down she knew Adrian Hargrove wasn't done. He wasn't. Lena spent the next 2 weeks doing what hard-working, good people always do when life punches them. She tried again. She applied everywhere: restaurants, hotels, diners, bakeries, cafes. At first, the rejections were polite. "We'll call you." Another candidate matched our needs. Then they became colder. "Sorry, we're full. Don't leave your résumé." By the 10th rejection, Lena started to feel that something was wrong. By the 20th, she knew it. And on the 27th interview, the truth finally slipped out. The hiring manager at a small restaurant in the Mission District glanced at her name on the screen, went pale, and immediately looked away like the walls had ears. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, leaning in. "Listen. I'm going to be honest with you because you look like a good person." Lena's chest tightened. "What is it?" He lowered his voice even more. "You're blacklisted." She froze. "What?" "No one in hospitality in this city is going to hire you," he said, jaw clenched like he hated the words. "If they do, they'll lose suppliers. They'll lose leases. They'll get audited. They'll get ruined." Lena's breath turned thin. "Because of Adrian Hargrove," she whispered. The manager didn't confirm it directly, but his silence screamed it. Lena walked out into the sunlight and suddenly it felt like the city had changed texture. The streets were the same. The people were the same. But the world now had an invisible leash around her neck. And she couldn't even see who was holding it. At home, Noah tried to pretend he didn't notice how Lena's meals became smaller. How her hands shook slightly when she counted cash. How she stayed up too late whispering to herself over bills. But one night, when Lena thought he was asleep, Noah stood in the doorway holding her phone. "Why are you searching food banks near me?" he asked quietly. Lena's throat tightened. She didn't look up. "Just checking resources." Noah's voice cracked. "You're doing it again." She finally turned. "Doing what?" "Carrying everything," he said, eyes glossy. "Like you're not allowed to be tired." Lena swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll be a doctor soon," she whispered. "Then life will get better." Noah stepped forward. "Life should be better now." That's when Lena broke. Not fully, she didn't collapse. But her voice turned small. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I really don't know." Noah hugged her like she was the younger sibling. And for the first time in years, Lena let herself lean into someone's arms. 2 days later, the situation turned from bad to desperate. Their landlord left a final notice taped to the apartment door. Eviction in 14 days. Lena stared at the paper until her vision blurred. 14 days. 14 days until they were sleeping in their car. 14 days until Noah's med school would become impossible. 14 days until everything she'd sacrificed for would collapse. That night, she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling job listings with shaking fingers, when a posting appeared that looked like it didn't belong. Voss Hospitality Services, immediate hire. Private events/high-end clientele. No experience required. Salary 3 times standard rate. Start immediately. Lena blinked. The name made her stomach flip. Boss. Not Hargrove. But her mind flashed back to that black card in her drawer. A phone number. No name. No title. Just numbers. Her fingers hovered over the screen. This felt too perfect. And in Lena's world, too perfect usually meant too dangerous. But then she looked down the hallway at Noah's bedroom door. She thought about the eviction notice. She thought about Noah's textbooks. And she thought about the way Adrian Hargrove had smiled while she burned. Lena clicked apply. The building where Voss Hospitality was located didn't look like a trap. That was the problem. It was sleek glass, clean marble, soft lighting, and staff who smiled like they had never known hunger. The receptionist greeted her warmly. "Miss Carter? Please go up to the 3rd floor. Human Resources is expecting you." Expecting her. That word made her skin prickle. She rode the elevator up, forcing her breathing to stay steady. On the 3rd floor, a woman in her 40s with sharp hair and kind eyes greeted her with an almost comforting smile. "Lena Carter," she said, reading her file. "Wonderful. Please sit. I'm Marjorie." The interview felt easy. Too easy. "Tell me about your experience. Tell me about your work ethic. Are you comfortable with night events?" Lena answered carefully, trying not to sound desperate. But when Marjorie smiled and slid a contract across the table after only 15 minutes, Lena's heart stopped. "You're hired," Marjorie said. Lena stared. I'm sorry, what?" "You're hired," Marjorie repeated smoothly. "We need reliable staff. Your background shows consistency and resilience." Resilience. If she knew what Lena had survived recently, that word felt less like praise and more like Selection. Lena looked at the contract. The salary was real. So high it almost didn't make sense. Enough to pay rent. Enough to save. Enough to breathe again. What's the catch? Lena asked before she could stop herself. Marjorie laughed lightly as if she'd heard it 100 times. Our clientele is elite, she said. They demand perfection. We pay for excellence. Lena swallowed, suspicious, but she signed. Because hunger makes even the smartest people gamble. That night, Lena pulled the black card out of her drawer again. She stared at the phone number. Her thumb hovered. She didn't press call. Because what would she even say? Hello, mysterious stranger. You saved me. Now I might be walking into danger. Can you save me again? Lena didn't want to be a burden. So she put the card back. And she promised herself she'd be careful. Across the city, in a penthouse that wasn't listed on any property records, Lucien Voss stood at a wall of glass overlooking San Francisco. Behind him, his right-hand man, Declan, held a folder thick with documents. She signed, Declan said. Lucien's gaze didn't move from the city lights. Good. Declan's jaw tightened. You're certain this is the right way? Lucien turned slightly, and in the dim light his eyes held something not entirely human. This is the only way, he said softly. Declan hesitated. The Hargroves are baiting her. They're trying to trap her through employment channels. They want her desperate. Lucien's expression hardened, ancient and cold. And desperation makes people easy to break, he murmured. A quiet pause. Then Lucien said, which is why we will reach her first. Declan opened the folder. We have confirmation Adrian has been making calls. Blacklisting her. Pressuring landlords. Spreading rumors. It's systematic. Lucien's fingers curled slightly, not in anger, in restraint. And Conrad Hargrove? Lucien asked. Declan's voice lowered. Conrad is negotiating a major financial deal. He's told his people not to create public scandal. Lucien's lips barely moved. He will regret that. Declan flipped to another page. There's something else. Lucien finally turned fully. Declan swallowed. The car accident that killed Lena's parents 5 years ago. Lucien's gaze sharpened. It wasn't random, Declan said. The room seemed to darken. What do you mean? Lucien asked, voice like ice. Declan placed a photo on the table. A police report. A crash diagram. And a name circled in red. The truck driver was on Hargrove payroll, Declan said quietly. Not officially. But through layers of shell companies. Lucien stared at the report. Something old moved behind his eyes. Something dangerous. And suddenly, Lena's suffering was no longer just cruelty. It was a pattern. A system. A hunt. Lucien's voice dropped to a whisper. They didn't just ruin her job, he said. They ruined her life. Declan nodded grimly. Lucien picked up the black card, another copy of the one Lena held. She thinks she's alone, he murmured. Then his eyes glowed faintly gold. But she has no idea what just chose to protect her. The next week, Lena reported for her first assignment. Marjorie handed her a uniform, black dress, simple, elegant. Tonight is a private event, Marjorie said. High profile. Very important. Lena adjusted the collar nervously. Where? Marjorie's smile didn't change. North Beach, she said. A private venue called Rosario's. Lena's stomach dropped for reasons she couldn't explain. Because that name sounded familiar. Like something whispered in the city's bloodstream. And when Lena arrived at Rosario's, the cafe looked ordinary from the outside. But inside, there was a heavy oak door at the end of the hallway. 2 men in suits stood there with eyes like wolves. Lena's throat went dry. She tried to back up. But one of the men opened the door before she could turn. Miss Carter, he said smoothly. Welcome. And Lena stepped inside. Not knowing she had just walked into the heart of Lucien Voss's world. Not knowing the Mafia boss who had watched her burn was about to reveal himself. And not knowing the real reason she had been hired was standing behind that door. The night the monster chose her. The oak door closed behind Lena with a quiet, final click. It didn't sound loud, but it felt permanent. The hallway she stepped into was nothing like the simple cafe outside. The air changed first, cooler, heavier, perfumed faintly with cedar and something metallic she couldn't identify. Dim golden lights glowed along the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to move when she didn't. This wasn't a restaurant. This was a private world. Follow me, the suited man said. Lena nodded silently, forcing her feet to move even though instinct screamed at her to run. They entered a grand ballroom hidden inside the building's second floor. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above polished marble floors. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant gowns moved through the room with quiet confidence and expensive smiles. The richest people in the city were here. Politicians, CEOs, investors. Faces Lena recognized from news headlines. And suddenly she understood why the pay was so high. This wasn't hospitality. This was service to power. Marjorie appeared beside her and adjusted the collar of Lena's uniform. Stay calm. Stay invisible. Serve the guest. That's all you need to do. Lena nodded again. Invisible. She had spent her entire life mastering that skill. But tonight, invisibility wouldn't last. Because across the ballroom, a pair of steel blue eyes had already found her. Lucien Voss stood near the far wall speaking to a group of executives. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. To everyone else he looked like a powerful businessman hosting a private event. Only a few in the room knew the truth. That the man they politely laughed with had ruled criminal empires for centuries. That he had outlived wars, kings and governments. That he was not human. Lucien's gaze stayed on Lena as she nervously picked up a tray of champagne flutes. She's here, Declan murmured beside him. Lucien's jaw tightened slightly. Yes. Declan studied him carefully. You look concerned. Lucien didn't answer. Because concern wasn't a word vampires used. But something unfamiliar twisted quietly in his chest. Lena moved through the crowd carefully, balancing the tray with steady hands even though her heart pounded loudly in her ears. Every step felt like walking on a stage where she didn't know the script. Then she heard a voice that made her blood turn to ice. Well, Adrian Hargrove said. Look who it is. The tray nearly slipped. Lena turned slowly. Adrian stood beside the bar, drink in hand, smirk firmly in place. His expensive suit couldn't hide the cruelty in his eyes. You get fired and somehow land a better job? He laughed softly. Impressive. Lena swallowed. Excuse me. She tried to move past him. He stepped into her path. You didn't think you could escape me, did you? Her voice trembled. Please move. Adrian leaned closer, lowering his voice. Do you know whose event this is? Lena shook her head. My father's business partners are here, he said. I told them about you. Told them how clumsy you are. The champagne glasses rattled slightly on the tray. Adrian smiled wider. Tonight is going to be very embarrassing for you. He walked away, humming softly. Lena stood frozen. The trap snapped shut inside her chest. This job, this event. It wasn't coincidence. It was revenge. Across the room, Lucien had seen everything. The way Lena stiffened. The way Adrian smirked. The way fear flickered across her face before she hid it. Lucien's hand tightened around his glass. Declan leaned closer. Say the word. Lucien's eyes darkened. Not yet. Because predators didn't strike when angry. They struck when the outcome was guaranteed. The evening progressed. Guests laughed, toasted, celebrated deals worth billions. Lena moved quietly between them, trying to stay unnoticed. But Adrian wasn't finished. Halfway through the event, he deliberately bumped her shoulder as she carried a tray of drinks toward a table of investors. The tray tipped. Glasses shattered across the marble floor. Champagne splashed across an expensive silk dress. The room fell silent. Adrian gasped dramatically. Oh my God. Are you serious right now? Lena froze, panic flooding her veins. I'm so sorry. Sorry? Adrian snapped loudly. This dress costs more than you make in a year. All eyes turned toward her. Whispers spread. The humiliation returned like a familiar nightmare. Security, Adrian called casually. I think this girl needs to leave. Two guards started moving toward Lena. Her vision blurred. Not again. Please not again. Then a voice cut through the room. Stop. One word. Quiet. Come. Absolute. The guards froze mid-step. Every conversation died instantly. Lucien Voss stepped forward. The entire atmosphere of the ballroom shifted like gravity had changed direction. Adrian's confidence flickered. Mr. Voss, this doesn't concern you. She works for me, Lucien said. The words were simple. But the room reacted like a bomb had gone off. Adrian blinked. What? Lucien stopped beside Lena. Close enough that she could feel the cool presence radiating from him. You will apologize, Lucien said. Adrian laughed nervously. Excuse me? You orchestrated this, Lucien continued calmly. You blacklisted her. Fired her. And now humiliate her again in my house. Adrian's face turned pale. You don't know what you're talking about. Lucien tilted his head slightly. I know everything. Silence thickened. Lucien's voice dropped lower. You forget, Adrian, your father does business with me. The color drained from Adrian's face completely. The investors at the table began whispering urgently. Lucien turned to the crowd. I do not tolerate cruelty in my establishments, he said calmly. It reflects poor judgment, poor character, poor business. A long pause. Then he said the words that shattered Adrian's world. Anyone associated with Adrian Hargrove will find future partnerships with my organization difficult. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Deals worth millions hung in the balance. Reputations trembled. Adrian stared around the room in horror as businessmen subtly stepped away from him. Phones buzzed. Assistants whispered urgently. His humiliation unfolded in real time, just like Lena's had. Lucien leaned closer and spoke so only Adrian could hear. This is your first lesson. Adrian's voice shook. You can't do this. Lucien's eyes glowed faintly gold. Oh, he murmured softly. I already have. The guests quickly returned to their conversations, but the shift was permanent. Adrian stood alone in a room full of people who suddenly had urgent calls to take elsewhere. Lena stared at Lucien in shock. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Lucien looked down at her. For a moment, the ancient predator disappeared, replaced by something unexpectedly gentle. Yes, he said quietly. I did. Their eyes met. And something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile, dangerous, unavoidable. For the first time, Lena didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, protected. And that terrified her more than anything else that had happened tonight. Because powerful men didn't help people like her. Not without a reason. Lucien held her gaze a moment longer before stepping back. We will speak tomorrow, he said. Then he walked away, leaving Lena standing in the middle of the ballroom with her heart racing, unaware that the biggest secret of all still waited to be revealed. Because Adrian Hargrove wasn't the true enemy. His father was. And Lucien Voss had just declared war. The girl the king chose. The ballroom slowly returned to its rhythm, but Lena couldn't hear the music anymore. Her heart still pounded from the moment Lucien Voss had spoken those words. She works for me. No one had ever claimed her before. Not like that. Not in front of the world. And the way the room had obeyed him, the way powerful people had instantly stepped away from Adrian like he carried a contagious disease. It didn't feel normal. It felt ancient, dangerous, and deeply, deeply real. That night, Lena barely slept. Questions spun endlessly through her mind. Why had he helped her? Why did he know so much? Why did his presence feel like safety and danger at the same time? At 9 a.m. sharp, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her breath caught. Hello? Miss Carter, a calm male voice said. Mr. Voss would like to see you. Her stomach flipped. Today? Yes. A car will arrive in 10 minutes. The call ended. Lena stared at the phone. Her life had officially stopped being normal. The car waiting outside her building wasn't subtle. Black, glossy, silent. The driver opened the door without a word, and Lena stepped inside with trembling hands. They drove across the city and stopped in front of a skyscraper she'd only seen from bus windows. The penthouse elevator required a keycard. The ride up felt endless. When the doors opened, Lena stepped into sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. Lucien Voss stood near the glass, hands behind his back. He didn't turn immediately. You came, he said softly. You sent a car, Lena replied. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Fair. He turned. In daylight he looked even more unreal. Perfect posture. Perfect stillness. Eyes that seemed older than the skyline behind him. Sit, he said gently. Lena remained standing. I think I deserve answers first. Lucien studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. You do. He didn't begin with himself. He began with her parents. Your parents' car accident 5 years ago, he said quietly. It wasn't random. The world tilted. Lena's breath vanished. What? Lucien stepped closer and placed a thin folder on the table. Inside were photos, reports, diagrams, evidence. The truck driver worked for a logistics company owned through Hargrove Shell Corporations, Lucien said calmly. The case was buried. Lena's knees weakened. No, that can't be. They were being forced to sell property, Lucien continued. They refused. The company needed that land. Tears blurred her vision. They were murdered, she whispered. Lucien didn't soften the truth. Yes. Silence filled the room like water. Lena's hands shook violently as grief she had buried for years cracked open inside her chest. They took everything from you, Lucien said quietly. Her voice broke. Why are you telling me this? Lucien held her gaze. Because you deserve the truth, he said. And then after a pause he added softly. And because I will not let them hurt you again. The room felt too small for her emotions. Anger, grief, relief. Everything collided at once. You can't promise that, she whispered. Lucien's eyes darkened slightly. I can. Lena shook her head. You don't understand how powerful they are. A faint, almost sad smile appeared. Oh Lena, he said softly. You don't understand how powerful I am. The temperature in the room dropped. The sunlight dimmed behind passing clouds. And for the first time, Lena noticed something she had missed before. Lucien didn't breathe. Not like humans did. No rise of his chest. No subtle rhythm. Just stillness. Perfect, unnatural stillness. Her heart began racing again. What are you? Lucien didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window and looked out at the city he had watched grow for centuries. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I was born in 1683. Lena stopped breathing. I have watched empires fall, he continued. I have buried friends, enemies, kings, and monsters. He turned slowly. Golden light flickered faintly in his eyes. I am what your world calls a myth. Her voice trembled. A vampire? Lucien nodded once. He didn't step closer. He didn't force her to accept it. He simply stood there, offering truth like an open hand. Lena stared at him. Fear rose first. Then something unexpected replaced it. Understanding. Because suddenly everything made sense. The way the room obeyed him. The way powerful men feared him. The way he had appeared exactly when she needed him. You saved me, she whispered. Lucien's voice softened. You saved me first. She blinked. What? You reminded me why humanity matters, he said quietly. I had forgotten. Weeks passed. And the war began quietly. Hargrove investors pulled out one by one. Investigations surfaced. Deals collapsed. Hidden scandals leaked to the press. Lucien never touched them publicly. He didn't need to. He simply removed protection. And the powerful fell like dominoes. Adrian Hargrove's trust fund vanished into legal investigations. Conrad Hargrove faced federal charges within months. The empire built on cruelty crumbled faster than anyone thought possible. The city called it karma. Lucien called it balance. One evening, months later, Lena stood on the same penthouse balcony watching the city lights flicker to life. Life had changed. Noah was thriving in medical school. They had a new apartment. Security. Stability. Lucien stepped beside her. You're quiet, he said. She smiled softly. Just thinking about how different everything feels. Lucien studied her carefully. I never asked for anything in return, he said quietly. I know. A gentle silence settled between them. Slow. Comfortable. You could leave, he said. Live a normal life. Lena looked at him. At the man who had protected her, believed in her, fought for her before she even knew the truth. I don't want normal, she said softly. Lucien's breath caught, an unconscious human habit he hadn't done in decades. You don't know what my world is, he warned. I know what your heart is, she replied. Silence stretched. Then Lucien reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. For the first time in centuries, the immortal king allowed himself to hope. Far below them, the city glowed with millions of lives moving through the night. Above it stood a girl who had once been invisible. And the ancient king who had chosen her. Because kindness had reached a monster's heart. Because cruelty had finally met consequences. Because sometimes the most powerful love stories begin with a spilled cup of coffee.